Well, good morning, everyone. And every day we rise, it's a great day to be alive. And welcome to the Portsmouth Coffee Talks morning show. I'm James Overton, and I'm here solo right now. My co-host, one co-host, probably can't make it, and we're probably waiting on the colonel to tune in. But anyway, and we have a special guest, and today's topic is going to be this is suicide awareness and prevention month. So we're going to talk about that subject. And we have our resident expert and guest host that been on here since like 2016. He's been coming on with me and talking about different issues. And I really appreciate his input and whenever he comes on. So I think it's appropriate for him to be on with this subject. And of course, we were scheduled to have Dr. Ernestine Duncan, who is a professor of psychology at Norfolk State University. But she's a little under the weather today. So we hope as the day goes on, she feel better and be with us next time. And she has been with us just as long as Bruce. So I don't know who has the most appearances, but we're going to have to check that out and see who's winning in that area. But anyway, good morning, Dr. Bruce. How you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. And thanks for being with us this morning. And we're going to get right into it, talking about suicide awareness and prevention. And, a lot of people, most of the time, don't realize, I mean, you see it in the news, but don't realize the people that have these problems. They think it's mostly people that, well, for lack of better words, on the lower end of the spectrum that have all the problems and get to the point where they just want to end their lives. But people that have it all, that we perceive as having it all, also have those problems. Let's talk a little bit about that. So, and then work our way into all the other issues concerning suicide. We've seen the celebrities, like Don Caners. I mean, we look at him all over the years and seen him with Soul Train, and we know his story, how he started it, and for years had this successful show. And to us, looking at it, he had it all. Had the wealth, the present wealth, and probably future wealth, because he created that wealth for his family, so they're still benefiting. So what happens, with people like that, we talk about chemical imbalance, we talk about even though you have it all, problems come up, or your mind just can't take but so much. But we see other people going through a lot of things. So what happens, even at that level, with people that just want to take their life, want to just end it all?
I think the reasons for individuals seeing suicide as an option, it varies according to the individuals and the situations that they're in. But I know one thing is pretty universal about suicide is that people who commit suicide don't really want to die, but what they want is relief from whatever pain that they experience, whatever suffering they're experiencing. Um, we tend to do better when we can see things that are pretty obvious to us and we can point them out. But suicide is something that may, or the ideation around suicide may manifest itself inside the person. You don't necessarily see all the warning signs because it's really illogical for a human being to want to take his own life. You just think about that.
Yeah.
It's not logical at all. So we don't expect it. We don't really suspect that with people, that somebody would do that. Self-harm is not normal. It's not usual. And it's definitely a reflection of some debilitating emotional situation that they're in or event that has occurred. So because it's not something that we generally expect people will do, because it's just so illogical that we think that somebody would take their life, we don't really see see the warning signs when those signs are present. And you talk about some of the famous people. I reflect back to the young woman who was a beautiful young woman that was a television personality. She was Miss USA. She was an attorney, and she jumped off a building.
Yeah.
You look at Regina King's son. He was the son of a celebrity. I'm sure he was privileged in his life, um, because of who his mom was, those kinds of things. And then someone who really loved his mom and she loved him, she missed all the warning signs, which is no fault of her own because most people would. But these things happen and people don't even expect it. And I think on a personal note, I know my son, and this happened, I want to say last year, at least last year, the year before. Let's see, um, probably no more than 2 years ago or a year. But my son, when he was a student in college, he was friends with twin brothers. And he was a little closer to one versus the other, but they all were friends. And from out of nowhere, he committed suicide and he was 20 some years old. African
Well,
male, local here in the local area, and committed suicide. And when I tell you, no one saw that coming. No one saw the warning signs. And he did so many things to prepare for the suicide. It wasn't that one day he said, I'm going to jump off a bridge and jumped. There was preparation that he went through to prepare for the suicide, such as um, he stopped going to work, stopped making his car payments. He started to purchase things from Amazon for people that he loved. So he ran his credit cards all the way up and he purchased all these items and they were delivered and he organized those items, positioned those items in the space where he committed the suicide and labeled those items for who he wanted to have them, and wrote a note. So a lot of times it's not as much of an impulsive act as you think. There's some planning that goes into it. There's some thought that goes into it. Sometimes they will choose a day, a time, and a place ahead of time.
mhm,
Um, and part of the ritual of the suicide, or for the person committing the suicide, sometimes they will. Um, an example would be they will go around on in a particular time frame or on a particular day, and they will visit people that they normally don't visit or haven't visited in a long time. And the visit seems odd to the person who they're visiting because they weren't expecting it or it's not usual. And they're just having conversation with the person. And really it's their way of saying goodbye. They're making their rounds to say goodbye to everybody. And then if something happens, the people say, I never realized it, but that's what he was doing. He was coming to see me for the last time. So and there's some warning signs I think that people should be aware of
mhm,
as it relates to suicide. So when people start expressing like feelings of hopelessness or a lack of purpose in life, um, and now what I'm going to share with you are signs that really should not be taken in isolation. One thing doesn't mean that a person is going to commit suicide, but in combination with a few things combined, that could be a red flag to people around them. Again, expressing feelings of hopelessness or lack of purpose in life. Um, Talking or writing about death, dying or suicide. If somebody writes, well, um, everybody would be better off if I wasn't here. You may hear somebody to say something like that. Um, an increased use of alcohol and drugs is also one of the warning signs. Not just use of alcohol and drugs, but maybe the increase is the piece you should be um, looking at. Also, a withdrawal from family, friends, or activities. Now, that's important. When you have somebody that's really engaged with the family, they're outgoing, etc., and then all of a sudden you see them isolating from everybody, maybe not coming out of the home, not coming out of their room, or not willing to go places and do things like they normally do, that withdrawal is also a sign. It's a sign of depression as well sometimes. Um, this is another red flag that people should think about when they start giving away things.
mm,
Somebody comes to you, Slim, and they say, "Hey, you've always told me you admired my Rolex watch, and you know what? I want you to have it."
mm,
And you're like, "Well, the watch costs $10,000." No, don't worry about that. Money is not
Mhm.
important. I want you to have it. And they give you the watch and they go away. So they're giving away things because they know they're not going to need them. Is a big red flag. Um, Extreme mood swings or sudden changes in behavior. Um, Acting recklessly. Or engaging in risk-taking activities without concern for the consequences. Speeding on your car really fast, on your motorcycle, or doing things that normal people would conclude this is crazy. You could hurt yourself. This is dangerous. That is because they really don't care at that point. So the risk-taking behaviors in which they engage, it doesn't bother them, but it's a red flag to the people around them if they pay attention. Um, Feeling trapped, like there's no way out of a situation, is another red flag. And then changes in sleep, um, such as not sleeping enough, um, up all night, up all day, and it looks like they never sleep, or they sleep too much. They are always sleep and never really wanting to be up, awake, and engaged, and drastic changes in appetite or weight. So what that means is that the person who normally has a certain pattern of eating, all of a sudden begin to overeat. They eat more and more and more, or the opposite is that they stop eating, they eat less. And as a consequence of that, either they may experience uh, increase weight gain or decrease in weight. Now, those things about weight, appetite, and sleep are red flags for depression in general. Even if the person is not suicidal, they are red flags for people who are experiencing depression. So sometimes in the clinical world, when we assess people for depression, we ask them about their sleep. Have you really been sleeping, or decrease, increase, etc., to try to gauge that. But those are some of the warning signs that people may recognize.
Let
And
me
like I said, go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask you this. And you mentioned all the warning signs and the big red flags and everything, and that's important. That's why these shows like this are important, or for people to be aware of these warning signs. Because normally in our community, if you see any one of these things, the first thing we're going to do is talk about that person. Oh, Slim sure was acting weird today, and then the conversation spreads throughout. Slim, but nobody thinks about Slim might be having a problem. They just talking about Slim you
Mm-hmm.
know, excuse me, having a problem. And it's just because we all see these signs, but we don't relate it to depression. Or he might be depressed, or maybe I need to be a little bit more thoughtful about what he's going through. But we're going to talk about him and spread the word throughout the community. Something's wrong with Slim. And I don't know, he must be drinking too much. He must be smoking that stuff or something. Anything but what the real problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, I guess shows like this and just trying to get that word out to people to pay attention to what's really going on, probably many times in your own household.
Mm-hmm.
And we missed that. And that's like you said earlier with Regina King, it probably was signs up there, out there or in right in her face, but she wasn't aware oh, that's strange. That day, she just thought her son was acting weird, and like you said, they picked times. It was like a day or something before his birthday or after his birthday.
Mm-hmm.
They picked times, that, oh, you're going to remember this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think they're trying to punish people that they love um, by doing it. Sometimes the method that they use or the place that they um,
They
commit.
crying out.
Yeah, I don't think it's meant to hurt people that they love, but it's really um, feeling as though they have no other option, that the pain they feel won't go away. Emotional pain, I think, is a little, you have physical pain and you have emotional pain. And we tend to go to a doctor a lot quicker when the pain is physical, when it's
Right.
emotional. We figure that we can think our way through it, we can talk our way through it, and this kind of thing. That's why recently I posted on social media the comment where I said, um, it's important to know when your child needs a licensed therapist versus a lecture and preaching from you, because we tend to treat mental health as though um, it's a matter of cheerleading and encouraging and reprimanding and telling people what they should do, and all of that lecturing they think will work. But when people have severe mental illness, they really need to see professionals. That's why suicide. There are a couple of reasons why people get hospitalized, like for mental health. Um, a lot of times, people say, "Well, you need to be admitted to the hospital." In most instances, they'll send you back home. However, the key things that will get you an admission. So it's sort of like when you go to the ER, if you tell them you have chest pains and things like that, as certain red flags to ER staff that will move you from the back of the line to the front of the line. You can go in and say my leg hurts because you fell down, and then somebody, and you've been there for 2 hours waiting, and somebody that walks into the ER who has chest pains 5 minutes ago, they're seen before you. That's because the ideal of chest pains suggests maybe heart attack, etc. Those are more life-threatening um, immediate illnesses. So in hospitalization for psychiatric illness, if you're going to be admitted, it's usually because you're homicidal, meaning that you're a threat to other people, you may kill or harm someone else, or you're suicidal, meaning that you are harm to yourself. You can't just go to a psych hospital emergency room and say, I'm just upset um, um, about, maybe your husband cheating on you, something like that. And you're angry and you're upset and you have anxiety. Like, they're not going to admit you because you have a panic attack or some type of anxiety, but they will admit you if you say that you're suicidal, homicidal, um, and those kinds of things. So suicide is one of the most significant things um, that deserve immediate attention if the warning signs are there. And the other thing we tell people too, especially in my work when in education and public education, is that we say that you should always believe someone when they say that they're going to take their life. And sometimes people would say, "Oh, they're just doing it. They're seeking attention. They want attention. That's the reason they're doing it. Oh, they're not going to do it." And there have been instances where some people would say, "Well, then kill yourself."
Yeah. Yeah. And then they do it.
And then they do it. And
They actually do it. Yeah.
yeah. So sometimes um, people will threaten suicide more than once, pretty often. And then the family and people around them start to say, they say that all the time, they're not going to do it. So in public education, we train people to realize that no matter how no matter how serious you feel the threat might be, we always believe it, we always take it serious, and we always act appropriately to give them the support that they need.
Let me ask this, and we can move on after this. But you talk about all the signs and the responsibilities that we may have, as a family member to look out for. And let me share a personal thing with you. When I was in my early 20s, I was having some issues, you know, and my father would get on me. And one time I was in the car riding with him, and he was telling me, chastising me for something I had done. And I had done a few things. And I said, "Dad, I think I might need to see somebody, you know, and this is the sign of the times." And he said, "No, you don't need to see anybody." I think now, today, if I had said that, he probably would have, reacted differently. But that was the times people didn't want to accept that it might have been some kind of issue, because I was actually telling him, like you said, some people will tell you that they're going to commit suicide, but I wasn't telling them that. But I was telling them, I think I might need some help because right now I don't understand the actions I'm taking. You know, so and it stopped there because he stopped it, and I was grown enough at the time to, if I realized that, to take actions for myself, but I didn't. I was looking for something from him, validation. Say, okay, you know, because all he saw what I was doing wrong, and not putting him down. He was, doing what he was supposed to do as a father, but he wasn't prepared to say my son might need some counseling, or my son might be crazy, even though I might have been doing some crazy things that was out of character for me.
Mhm.
You follow me? And some people, yeah, do do tell their family members, and like you said, they just wave it off. So the advice is pay attention when they tell you things like that. Pay attention, even if it's nothing.
Well, crazy is not a clinical term. It's not a term that we use in mental health. It's really a slang term, and it is a derogatory.
Yeah,
So, one thing we can do is stop using the term crazy to describe people who have a health condition. We don't call somebody crazy who has cancer. We say the person is experiencing challenges around their health as it relates to cancer. Crazy further stigmatizes the
yeah.
whole idea of mental health.
It
Uh,
takes the seriousness away from it.
and it causes people not to want to seek help. We're doing better, I think, as a nation around mental health than we did years and years ago, because I know in the African American community, first of all, our rates of suicide are lower than the rates of suicide for white Americans. However, our rates are increasing. Um, Also, I believe that the stigma is a lot less. We still have stigma, but it's not like it was many, many, many years ago. I hear more and more African American people saying, "I have a therapist, I go to counseling," that type of thing. So that's the good news. But for us, in our culture, in our community, we've always found relief through our relationship with our church, our religion, God, etc. We found relief there. However, what's happening is that a lot of these conditions are so significant that you're not going to find relief um, in the inside of a church. The churches are not mental health treatment institutions, so they have limits, real limits to what they're able to do. For people that have um, minor problems, of course, leaning on your faith, talking to your pastor, that kind of thing, it's helpful. Praying about it, those types of things are helpful. But severe psychiatric conditions are not going to be worked out by prayer and somebody laying hands on you. It does not work when it comes to bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, um, these other type of conditions, post-traumatic stress. And when a person is feeling suicidal, I'm not really that really, I'm not believing that's really going to be the answer that they need. They need real um, professional support. And like you said, when you were younger, you said, I needed help. Parents back then, it was a different time.
Yeah,
Your dad probably didn't act any differently than any other father would have acted in the same situation.
yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, but today we know more, so we have to do better. And that's why I was saying, when your child comes to you and says, um, "I'm struggling," don't sit them down and give them a motivational speech and preach to them, but link them to the services that they need. Um, or the outcome could be an outcome similar to what Regina King had for her son. Now, this is the thing. Sometimes when people are suicidal, once they get to that point where they're determined that they're going to do this, they may not tell you that they need help. They may not tell you where they are in their thinking. They're just doing things around you that if you don't recognize it, if you don't recognize the warning signs, you wouldn't know. And then what happens after the suicide? is that family members and friends feel so guilty. They feel like they could have stopped it,
Mhm.
which they couldn't. They feel like they should have saw the warning signs. They feel as though it's their fault. So you leave a lot of hurt people behind when you choose that as an option. And there's some other reasons why I think the suicide rates among African Americans have increased. Now, one of them has to do with social media, especially for young people. That social media can destroy a young person's self-esteem. They have access to information that they shouldn't have access to, and there's a lot of bullying and um, mistreatment of people that happens just on social media, even with people you don't know. I think there were some lawsuits, Slim, you may remember, where people were on social media bullying. They never saw the person, and then the parents tried to sue because they were just basically telling these young people to kill themselves.
Mhm.
And they actually did. And then the maturity of these young people, it's not where it should be. So they're very um, susceptible to um, the bullying that occurs, and they may react. Another thing is that there's a mental health stigma. We talked about that a second ago, and how it prevents African American people from seeking treatment. You don't want to be looked at as being crazy. And even in the military, Slim, some military um, soldiers will not seek mental health care because they believe that in some ways, if this information is a part of their military record, that it could prevent them from advancing and being promoted in the military. So now the military does have a lot of services for people who do need mental health care, but sometimes people may keep to themselves the challenges that they're experiencing because they think once they say, well, I need this care, then when they're up for promotion, it may affect that. We don't hesitate to say, I have a physical illness. Well, it depends on what illness is because, of course,
Yeah, yeah.
there's physical
Sometimes we're slacking there too.
yeah, yeah. So, but
But
however,
more
generally,
than likely, we will
yeah,
address that before we will something.
generally the physical illness is looked at differently than it is the mental illness, but really it's the stigma.
Yeah,
Um, and then
and
treatment is often less available to Black people.
yeah, and you mentioned the military, and look how it is with politicians. If you're running for office and they find out you had treatment, you had therapy, that becomes a part of the campaign against you, which should be something. Well, at least we know this guy was treated, because we see a lot of crazy politicians out there wondering where they're coming from. But
Mhm.
if we see something and it's on their record that they got treatment or they are in therapy, that should be a plus. But it's not treated that way. A lot of politicians had to back out because it was leaked that they had some sessions, or they are in session, which should be a plus, because this person is really working on himself, and he's probably going to be a better person, a better politician for it. But that's not the way it is. Let me ask you this, Bruce. We talked about, I think before, about chemical imbalances that people may have, and talk a little bit about that, because that might be something that's working in the brain, or wherever it starts, that the actual person might not realize is going on with them. So, are the signs the same for that, uh, for the chemical imbalance? And usually the chemical imbalance or any other kind requires medication or something like that. But how do they diagnose that the person actually, might be fine in every other way, and dealing with certain things, but something is going on chemically off, in their brain or something like that?
Well, one thing about mental health is like if your blood sugar is high, they give you a blood test. They can measure your blood glucose, and they can just tell you because of blood work.
Hmm.
Health is a little different because a lot of what happens in mental health, they're not like blood tests to determine it. Like, you cannot determine that a child has autism through a blood test, or a child has ADHD through a blood test. There are no such things as blood tests. So how we determine it a lot of times is through observation, history, collecting detailed information about the history, and looking at their patterns of behavior. The tool that we use in mental health is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual 4. We call it the, excuse me, not 4 or 5. We call it the DSM-5, and it's like a the Bible for mental health. It has all of the mental health diagnoses in it, and you try to get into the ballpark of where you think this behavior is leading you. For an example, if there's a category for mood disorders, and in that category there are multiple mood disorders, and so in that category you have to narrow it down, and it has a criteria which says these are 8 example would be 8 factors that point to this disorder, and the person must meet at least 6 of them, something like that. That's the way it's set up. Now, with chemical imbalances, an example of a mental health disorder that is a chemical imbalance is bipolar disorder. And bipolar disorder is not something that is caused by the environment. That's number one. The environment cannot cause bipolar disorder. However, the environment can make bipolar disorder worse. So it is important to try to make the environment better, but it doesn't cause it. Bipolar disorder is the etiology of that is genetic, it's inherited, it's just like if you inherit high blood pressure. You know, my mom had it, my grandma had it, everybody had high blood pressure in my family. Although diet and exercise and that kind of thing can make it better or worse, sometimes it's something that's genetic in origin. Also, things like schizophrenia, those types of things are genetic, that are
Wow.
inherited. So if you have people in your family that are, and that's why the family history is important. So when you're
Yeah.
assessing a person, you're asking them about their mothers, their fathers, their brothers and sisters, and you say, well, my mom was diagnosed with bipolar. It doesn't mean necessarily that you will have it, but it is a red flag. And if you don't have it, it could be that your children might have it. And the way you treat it is with medication, because there is a chemical imbalance in the brain, and the medication helps to balance it. Things like bipolar and schizophrenia, those types of things, you treat those. The first course of treatment is medication. That's where you start. You just don't start counseling somebody about the condition. You want to get them medically stable first. And one of the things that happens too with bipolar is that once you take the medications and you start to feel better, and your mood swings are not so erratic, and you started feeling really good, people attribute their um, better functioning, or the improvement in their mood and feeling, to themselves. They say that I feel this way because I'm just more focused, and I'm more determined to be better. And then they stop taking the medication. They
Wow.
attribute their feeling better to themselves, but not to the medication. They
And,
stop
and
taking the
I've
medication,
seen that personally with people,
right back.
that say I'm feeling better, or their excuse is the medication makes me
Well,
this, it makes me that, makes me sleepy, or something like that.
yeah,
So
and it's,
and I have to be awake. So
yeah,
let me and yeah, and you mentioned earlier about how it's in the rise in the African American community, suicide with all different ages, and it's kind of perplexing to think back. You know, if you look at our history, you know, even back to slavery, and I'm sure they didn't keep records of suicide back then, but I'm sure a lot of those slaves committed suicide rather than go through some of the atrocities they were going through, which is, you know, not good, but it's almost understandable. How can we compare that kind of environment that we were in as an African American community to what's going on today? And we're seeing a rise in people taking their lives at all different ages, especially some of the young people. And I think you kind of hit on it earlier, talking about social media had a lot to do with it, has something to do with it, but it has to be some other things, something else going on. It's kind of hard to make that that comparison to what was going on in slavery and how we have it now, and why the suicide rate is rising, continuously rising.
Well, Slim, I think one thing about our culture as a people, we didn't have such high rates we haven't always had such high rates of suicide. I think the more we
Yeah, it was at one time that people would say black people don't kill themselves.
right,
We have more to live for. But go ahead. I'm
but
sorry.
I think the more we have assimilated into American culture, the more we have internalized Eurocentric views of the world, the more we have become, the more we have integrated with white people, the more we internalize their ways of solving problems.
Mm.
They've always committed suicide. That it's just that, and especially with middle class black people, you going to school with white kids, we're living a life very similar to theirs in terms of resources and in terms of lifestyles. We have bigger homes, bigger cars, all that kind of stuff. And we
Bigger bills.
yeah, bigger deals. But I believe what we do is that we also internalize that part of their life too, how they solve problems.
Mhm.
Before we became integrated the way we are now, we didn't commit suicide like this. The church was very important. We were spiritual. We believed. We prayed. And I'm saying that not to say that the church should take the place of mental health, but there's nothing wrong with the church and what it does in terms of providing a safe space for people to come and support each other around faith. And when that was strong, I don't think that suicide was an option. But now that
Yeah,
we
that
moved
that
away,
part of it saved lives.
yeah, we
That part
moved.
of it saved lives, Bruce, because if you really believe, it said you commit suicide, you're going straight to hell.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you move now that
Nobody wanted to go to hell. So
yeah, if as we move further away to traditional faith, and not this commercialized stuff that we have today, but real, real community, real church. Um, Suicide is on our list of things, just like other things that white people do
Mhm.
that we didn't used to do. The more we integrate with them, and you got to think about it, a dominant culture, and I want to say, it's almost like genes. Dominant genes will override recessive genes.
Mhm.
In culture, we have the white folks are the dominant culture in this country, whether we like it or not. And any other culture that intersects or aligns themselves with white culture, the white culture is going to become dominant. We're going to assimilate into their culture. They're not necessarily going to assimilate into ours. And when we assimilate into their culture, we adopt their views. We
Mhm.
adopt their ways of being. We adopt their ways of problem solving. When we weren't as assimilated as a people as we are now, suicide rates were lower. I'm not saying that nobody black ever committed
Mhm.
suicide, but the rates were lower. They say that the CDC says that in 2020, it showed that 49,000 people committed suicide. Um, and then they talked about um, that suicide deaths are increasing fastest among people of color, young people, and those who live in rural areas, with many groups seeing an increase of 30% or more. And it says that it says things like that. So we do know that the suicide rates are increasing.
yeah, let
Um,
me
Doc- Dr.
let me
Copeland.
introduce. Welcome, Leah. I'm glad you were able to make it. And before you get, I like to mention this, Leah. About your granddaughter when we had her on, and she was a student at the A&T, and she experienced a friend, that committed suicide when there was no signs that she could recognize at that time. And I think that was one of those things that she probably never forget that. And she's probably going to always be aware
mhm.
of the signs and what's going on because of that experience. And then she
Oh,
tried to share it with the other students there. And we were talking earlier, Leah, about, people kind of even not knowing the signs or kind of ignoring them or labeling the person off or using the word crazy, which is
Mhm.
not a clinical term, as Dr. Bruce pointed out. But it's even using that term is more demeaning and keeps people shy away from even getting help because you're called crazy. So
Yeah. And the young lady that you're referring to, very gregarious young lady, academics par excellence, Howard University student. She been tapped for programs as a freshman that was for seniors at at Howard University because she was such an excellent student. Took care of everybody else, fought everybody else's battles, fought everybody else's battles.
Mhm.
Always smiling, always happy, and no one would have ever suspected. It was during COVID, when COVID hit, and she went to New York, and I don't know what took place, but whatever took place, she committed suicide. And any of us who knew her, if you knew her, you would never think that she would have been an individual who would have done that. And that's why they say it's not always the person who's quiet that you have to be concerned about. You have to be concerned about that person who's smiling all the time too, because a lot of times they're masking the symptoms that they're feeling. They're not sharing it with anyone. And so we do have to be concerned about those individuals who are outgoing, gregarious. We have to look at them as well. But Doc, not only that, I wanted to ask you this question. I know suicide is one killing oneself. However, I'm beginning to feel that a lot of these shootings of our young people killing each other is a form of suicide as well. When I talked to a young man who had a shirt on and said, "Shoot me because I'm already dead." And this young man also told me that it was easier for him to shoot someone who looked like him because he didn't like himself. He hated himself. He said so it didn't cause him any problems to possibly shoot someone who looked like him. Could you expand on that? On this gun violence could be another form of suicide that's taking place in our community. And I apologize to you all for being late, but I was up to 3 o'clock working on grand grand reunion, and I am just exhausted. Okay, so
Yeah,
first, my apologies for coming on late.
understood.
But Dr.
Well,
Copeland, could you please
well,
address that issue?
Leah, you make an excellent point in this regard. Like I was telling Slim earlier, that the easiest way to get into a psych hospital is to say you're suicidal or you're homicidal. This killing on the street, this homicide, is a reflection of mental illness.
It
It's a
is.
reflection of some societal things that we try to address, but it's also a reflection of mental illness. Because I think what we want to do is to say, build more playgrounds, give these kids something to do, give them a job. But if they're mentally ill,
They need help.
playgrounds and jobs don't help them.
They
But
need
I don't
help.
hear anybody saying that we need to give our young people treatment.
Hmm.
Those are the kind of things that's going to help. So I think you're right. I think that once you can take someone else's life and you can go to bed and you can sleep like a baby and get up the next morning and go on about your business, it does reflect that inside you're already dead. Nobody can kill you because I'm
That's
already
right.
dead. And
Hmm.
then I think that I talked to Slim about some of the risk factors or warning signs for suicide, and one of them was risk-taking behavior.
Hmm.
That because they no longer care about their life, it's almost like a passive kind of suicide attempt. There's a concept called suicide by cop, where
Hmm.
a person will engage the police in
Yes.
some type of
Yes.
contingent. Usually get that
That's okay.
right.
We got you. We got you,
You know what
Doctor.
I mean? Wait. They will engage them in a battle,
Yes.
and with the intent for the police officer to actually take their life.
Hmm.
So I see the parallel between that and these young people on the street doing things that anybody with common sense will know that it will lead to death or incarceration or something like that. Now, when you are on a path to incarceration, even though it might not end your physical life, it ends your life in every other way. So, who would do or engage in risk taking behavior that would lead to that as a consequence? So yeah, I agree with you certainly, Leah. And I think there's something I'm actually going to be presenting with two other therapists at the National Association of Black Social Workers Conference. I believe if our proposal is accepted on the concept of um, race-based traumatic stress, talking about how racial um, trauma can affect us physically. It can affect our whole life. And I think that when you grow up in an urban environment where you experience a lot of trauma from just the urban environment, the killing, the unsafe conditions of that neighborhood, that's a kind of trauma. It's not a lot different than if you go to Iraq and you're engaged in combat and in war. In some of our most challenging urban communities, living there for some Black people, Black children, it's just like being in combat, being at
Mhm.
war. So we understand the concept of post-traumatic stress for people who've been to war, but do
Mhm.
we understand the concept of post-traumatic stress for people that live in urban environments? Do we understand this the racial trauma stresses that comes about as a result of racial trauma?
Mhm.
What you experience day to day, maybe harassment by law enforcement, maybe being looked over, passed over on your job when you know that you were the most qualified, having um, to regulate your behavior in such a way that you don't offend white people
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
the workplace, because if you do, there's a different outcome for you versus someone else. So yeah, Leah, I think you're right. You're 100% right about these young people, and we should look at the homicide with
Mhm.
the same concern that we look at suicide. Um, because killing someone is a significant mental health concern. Normal people don't kill people
Exactly.
for no reason. Normal people don't kill themselves.
Mhm.
It's not normal to want to kill yourself. If you want to kill yourself, then something is wrong and you need treatment. If you want to kill someone else, something is wrong and you need treatment. And the way that we treat people with mental illness for either one of those categories, a lot of times is incarceration, but not treatment.
And you're incarcerated, but you're not getting the treatment that you need.
And then you get
You come
right
back
back.
and you get out of jail and you go through the vicious cycle one more time.
Right, right, right. Exactly. So yeah, it's the suicide and homicide thing is just really distressing, and it's really harming our community. Just like the young man over at Norfolk State was killed recently.
Yes.
I don't think it was on campus because I'm the last person to give my university a bad name. I don't think it was on campus, but
No,
it
I
was
was off.
somewhere.
was
It was off campus. It was
Mhm.
somewhere around campus. And you
Yes.
think about who would do that
Mhm.
and why would they do it? Who would do it and what's going on inside that person's head? And you can't tell me that person is not ill.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, too many killings.
Yes.
And
well,
one of the other things, Slim, as it relates to some of these issues is that and that was one of the issues, the racism that Black people feel sometimes. You may not recognize it, but it could be a correlation between that and people wanting it in their lives because of the oppression that we feel. Sometimes you think about, should I be here in life? Would I have achieved even more if it were not for this racism? So racism sometimes is a factor as well, and in the distress that people feel.
and you're in the public schools and uh, doing that work in social work and high schools. How important is it for to have those counselors in the schools? And we're seeing it in elementary schools as well, because well, especially in high school, because that period in high school, a lot of changes are going on with a student, trying to be accepted, hormone changes, voice changes, wondering sexuality, wondering why things are happening to your body, involuntarily. So all these things are going on. So talk about how important it is to have those counselors on there, and when the counselors contact the parents, how important it is for them to pay attention to what reports might be coming to them
Well,
about their children.
one thing I do want to mention that I almost forgot until you mentioned it, the
Okay.
LGBT community is probably has some of the highest rates of suicide.
Mhm.
When these young people are experiencing struggles around sexuality, some of them are bisexual, gay, whatever, and they get rejected from their family, their community, their friends. That puts them at high risk for suicide. It's even higher in the Black community because the white community has always been a little more receptive to their gay members in their community. You know, it's easy to be white and gay than it is to be black and gay. Because one thing about our community is the church and the religion telling you that you're going to hell, et cetera, et cetera. Fortunately, in 2023, a lot of young black people are saying, you know, they're going to live their truth or whatever that is. They're going to be who they are. But for those who can't get to that point, it is real painful for those young people who are experiencing issues around sexuality and are frightened to tell, to share, and that puts them at a high risk for suicide. So the other thing I would say about school, to your question about school, is that one of the things that I advocate, and I know Leah has been on the school board before, but I would advocate that every school do mental health screenings. And the reason I say that is because
I agree with you 100%.
Mhm.
100%. Probably 200%.
Yeah, because what
Mhm.
happens is that, we screen children in elementary school for vision and hearing every year. We screen them for speech to see
Mm-hmm.
if there's any speech problems. We do not screen children for mental health concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a screening. And I tell you, one of the things we're going to do in my school division, we have this big mental health conference for parents, not for kids, but for parents. And our school board chair and our superintendent, they called me and they said, well, I want your department to do this. Our goal was 300 parents to come out to the convention center. We got about 1,200 people to come
Oh,
out on a weekday. And
and
this
that's amazing. That's
that's
amazing.
amazing. It's amazing. We got so many people to come out, and they doubled our budget for this year to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
it. They were generous with the budget. So we're sitting around just spending money left and right because we're going to do the best conference we can. But one of the things that we're doing at our conference is we're going to have mental health screenings for parents. There are two screenings that we're going to do. One of them is that we're going to give them a depression scale, and then the other scale that we're going to give them is the ACEs. Uh,
Aces, yes.
we're going to give
Yes.
them the ACEs. And what we're going to do is going to be confidential. They
Mhm.
fill it out, they leave their name and phone number, and we take it back to the office. And we're going to score each one of those assessments. And if the person looks like their depression score is high or elevated, we're going to call them and make referrals for them. I'm saying that should be done in public schools. We should
Why
be
are they not
screening.
using aces in the schools?
Well, one thing about the schools, the ACEs is really for adults because it's talking about adverse childhood
Yeah.
trauma.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you're right.
yeah,
You're right.
so you have to be,
However,
but they should be able to give depression scales.
thank you. Something
So
for the
if
kids, you
if
know?
you can screen their vision and hearing every year, you can also screen them for mental health. So I would say, if I could say anything to a superintendent or a school board, I would say use your mental health professionals in the schools, and annually you provide mental health screenings if it's nothing more than a student completing a depression scale. And then when you find students have elevated scores, you work with those students, alert the parents, make referrals for counseling. That could improve attendance, academics, behavior, and it could also be an early detector for potential suicide. But when you do nothing, you have kids walking around school in all types of turmoil, and no one has bothered to check in with them. We get
Exactly.
annual health screenings for if we somebody a normal person would think you're foolish if you didn't see your doctor once a year. For him to do routine lab work on you, blood work, etc. We should treat mental health and depression screenings as routine health care that everybody gets at least once a year, and we should be able to give that in schools. And I'm not sure why they don't do that.
You know,
um,
and after COVID, they talk so much about the
Yep,
psychic and the
yep,
mental health. I thought after COVID, when the kids enter back into the school, that they would have a program in place to address mental health because the kids went through turmoil during that time.
right, right.
And Dr. Copeland, some of the people I see who are supposed to be mental health counselors in the schools, how competent are these individuals? I see some walking around talking to kids, but it goes beyond just walking and quieting the kids down. How competent are the individuals who are supposed to be our mental health people in our school system?
I think that they sometimes they meet minimal criteria. I don't, we have these, and I don't want to offend anybody. I better not say that because I think you might have these people on as a guest. But we have outsourced the mental health care to different agencies. Some of these agencies are for-profit
That's
agencies, and
right.
they
That's
come
right.
in, they want to write a note and clock the amount of time they spent with the kids so they can
We're
get.
familiar with that, Dr.
Yes,
Copeland.
I am.
We're
Yes,
very familiar with that.
right. And so they're really not, and they're not your most highly trained professionals. I would suggest that school divisions, they employ licensed people, they employ licensed
Exactly.
therapists. Um, and maybe you can have someone that's training to earn a license to work under them, but you really should have a whole department devoted to behavioral and mental health in schools where
Yes.
you have counselors and these types of things. But I think most schools have outsourced that. They don't feel like that's within their um, realm of responsibility. They know that it's a problem. They know that children need help, but it's easy for them to outsource it than to take their own resources and create their own structure for dealing with that. But Leah, I don't think that the people are very competent. Usually, when they're highly, highly qualified, you got to pay them more, or they're not
Exactly.
going to work for the school.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't pay them if they're licensed and they're trained and they're experts in the field. They're not going to work for teachers' pay.
So, Dr. Duncan, Dr. Duncan,
Mhm.
Dr. Copeland,
Yeah.
Bruce, we had Carol Sanders has been making quite a few comments on here. And let me read this before we go. Let me read this comment and maybe you can address it. She says, my son has built up
Bruce.
anger. And in
Bruce.
parentheses, to me, most of the anger seems irrational. I have constant physical outlets for my own release, but he very rarely performs any strenuous activities. I think if he had similar release through activities, he would feel the same. Does this seem correct? And I have suggested he could release any degree of rage through running or perhaps boxing practice. Now, I think what she's actually saying
He,
with
James,
his
that's
rage, the
taking his
release would
time.
be come
Yes.
from exercise or something like that. How how does that fit into the realm of treating some sort of mental illness?
Oh, well, one, I would like to know how I would be interested in, and it's hard to assess somebody, and you just only know that little bit of
Right.
information about them. But I would want to know the person's age. I'm not necessarily somebody that supports um, violence, even if it's called sport, as a way of helping them to release rage. I'm not sure how that works. That's a physical activity. I think physical health is a correlation between physical health and mental health for sure. But you have to have somebody to talk about the root causes of the anger. Because I think she said he's angry with her. What is he angry about? What if
Yeah,
what
well, and she is adding here that I think his rage is rooted in his thoughts about being born poor and having little power to escape. He sees me still at the age of 43 and still has no hope. And I think that's a part. He looks at her age and not seeing any progress. I think that's what she's saying there.
okay.
I wish she had put his age. That might help you as well. But seems like that's
And
some of his
because
problem.
I don't know how old the young man is. Um, yeah, I would hate to go into depth about in answering her question based on limited information, but I think that I would say this much: I'm not sure that just giving him physical activity is going to address the problem. I will say that much. Physical activity and health and exercise and fitness and diet, all that stuff has a correlation to mental wellness, mental well-being. But I don't think that's the answer if those problems are significant. The other thing is you also have to investigate what type of experiences the individual has had. Have they suffered any trauma? Some of the trauma may be known or unknown to others around them, but you want to know what their experiences have been, what's the root cause of the anger.
Yeah,
That's why trauma focused care is very important. It's sort of like this trauma focused care has become a really important thing. in mental health, because years ago, if somebody came to you and they had an alcohol and drug problem, you would treat the alcohol and drug problem, but you would not treat the trauma associated with what led them to become dependent upon drugs and alcohol to begin with. So a lot of times we treat the surface of,
Exactly.
but not the root. And a lot of times the root of a lot of dysfunction is trauma, um, trauma, abuse, neglect. And I will tell you one thing I watched on YouTube yesterday. I watched, and this is something that you might be interested in. Kurt Franklin is a 30-minute documentary on YouTube.
I heard about that.
Yeah, it was very powerful. And even though as successful as he is,
Hmm.
as successful as he is, he has a very difficult relationship with his first son,
Yes.
who he had at an early age. Very difficult relationship. The son is in a lot of pain. Kurt
Hmm.
Franklin is in a lot of pain. He's in a lot of pain because his mother gave him away. He's in a lot of pain because the man he thought was his father wasn't his father. Then he met his father, and his mother still refused to acknowledge that this man is the father when the DNA
Hmm.
says clearly that it is. This is somebody who has, I would say, significant wealth. I don't want to say unlimited, but significant. He's not hurting financially. And a lot of times we think that money is happiness. Money is not always happiness. Rich people suffer depression and commit suicide and die and jump off buildings. So we cannot equate money
Yeah.
with happiness and sanity and that kind of thing. He's telling everybody through this documentary what his struggles are. And for somebody like him, you need to know all of those aspects, giving up for adoption, how that makes you feel like you're not wanted or welcome, that
Hmm.
kind of thing. A sense of belonging is important. That's on Maslow's hierarchy of
It
needs, a
is. That's
sense
for
of
sure.
belonging.
Hmm.
And when somebody gives you away, um and refuses to tell you who your father is, and your mother, she lives across the street but she doesn't come to see you, that's the kind of rejection that can be hard to deal with for other people. And then those kind of early childhood traumas impact your relationships in adulthood with your spouse and with your own children. And that's what has happened to Kurt Franklin, problem with his own children.
Hmm.
And then some addictive behaviors, his
Hmm.
addictive behaviors to pornography and those other
Hmm.
kinds of things,
Mhm.
that he was upfront about. So yeah, it's a, you just cannot diagnose or treat a person based on limited information. But I appreciate the lady's question. But I would say my answer would be, physical activity will not hurt somebody, but it may not answer the question of why they're so
Exactly.
angry. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, and in that, she did say he made appointments and refuses to go now. If he's doing that, I'm assuming he's an adult. If is he
He's
making his
20 years
own
old.
appointments
He's,
and not going? If he
she's,
was under her, he would have to go. But
she said he's
so
20 years of age.
she put it up there.
Uh-huh.
20, yeah. I figured he was an adult if he's making those decisions. So
Mhm. And the question would be, is there any drugs and alcohol involved?
Exactly.
Those kinds of things.
yeah,
And the other thing is, and I appreciate her question. And a good thing about this is that the earlier we intervene, I assure you that whatever she sees at 20, she didn't start seeing it today. She
Hmm.
probably saw it at 10 years old, 11 and 12. And those are the times when children will do what we ask them to do. We can take them to therapy, whether they want to go or not. So the earlier we intervene, the better, because once they become adults, then they do get to say, I'm going or I'm not going.
and Dr. Bruce, the last thing, would you suggest parents that might have children that are having the problems that those parents also seek, some sort of counseling, you
I,
know?
yeah, definitely. I think family counseling is very good. Sometimes children, I mean, you can love your parents and be angry with them at the same time. And
Right.
parents can love their children and make missteps as parents and not even know. Parents, it's not normal for parents to want to harm or hurt their kids, but sometimes we unknowingly do things, and sometimes we parent the way we were parented. Even if the parenting we received was not good or wrong, we still parent our kids that way unless we know better. So it's not about right and wrong. It's about reconciliation, addressing the issues that divide the family, being able to have a safe space to talk about it, and an objective person to kind of help you navigate and mediate that versus individual therapy is good, but sometimes if the root of your problem is family dysfunction,
Yeah.
family therapy works as well. It works as well. And it's a lot of stuff going on out here around fatherlessness. I feel so sorry for these young boys that don't have their fathers. It creates so many problems. But family therapy is a good way to go. Individual as well. I would say not one or the other. I would say both.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times when I work with couples in therapy, couples therapy is not enough. He needs to have a therapist for individual. She
Exactly.
needs to have one,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can have couples therapy, because a lot of times is the individual's unresolved issues, untreated untreated trauma that they bring into the marital relationship, and that needs to be worked on individually. So family therapy, couples therapy, individual therapy, sometimes you need them all.
And it's okay for Black people to see a therapist.
Absolutely. We should make t-shirts about that, and everybody
It's
wears t-shirts.
okay.
I
It
have a
doesn't make you crazy, okay?
I
It's
have a
okay.
therapist.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and those weekends when you are binging on streaming movies, 10 episodes, or when you're watching Big Brother or some of those other crazy shows, in between that, educate yourself about some of these real issues concerning mental health, because it could be in your family, it could be maybe not directly in your family, but your family, something could be going on, and you could lose a family member because you didn't see the signs, or you just didn't know how to deal with a certain situation. So make sure you educate yourself other with things other than just sitting back and watching all entertainment. If you can sit down for 3 hours and watch streaming, you can sit down for about 15 or 20 minutes or an hour a day or a week and educate yourself on the signs of possible suicide victims or mental health crisis or depression. So that's
Or,
my
James,
go ahead.
Getting your therapy from TikTok.
Or getting a therapist. That's the main thing. Even if your depression is mild, it could turn into something much deeper if you don't address it right away. And you could be to the point where a therapist, would have to, commit you if you let it get that far. Those things happen. Those things happen with people. Any last comments from you, Leah, and Dr. Copeland as we move on today?
But Dr. Copeland, I truly wanted to be on and on time this morning.
You came on time, Leah. That question you brought up was an on time question.
Yeah. But I just want to thank you so very much. And I think that this too is one of those issues where we need to address more often. We shouldn't just wait until Suicide Prevention Month or of that time in order to address it. This should be an ongoing conversation, because today you may have touched someone who realized, hey, maybe, yeah, I need some therapy. So maybe we need, at Portsmouth Coffee Talk, we need to look at the idea of making this, just as we said, insurance, making it a regular on our show. But we need to really address this issue, because we're really having a lot of problems in the school system, not only with the children, but with the adults as well.
Mm-hmm.
The parents sometimes are a worse problem than dealing with the children.
Mm-hmm.
So this is definitely something that we need to address on a daily basis. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your expertise. I want to thank you for what you brought to the table. And I just look forward to you coming back again to share more information for all of us in reference to mental health. Because we all, I can't think of his name now, but there was a Indian fellow, I can think of his name. He says, we all live in a house with 4 rooms: our mental room, our emotional room, our physical room, and our spiritual room. And it's important that we go and visit each of these rooms daily, and just to air them out, so you have to go and you have to address those issues. All 4 issues are issues that make you the person that you are. So let us get into the place where we're visiting our mental health room and addressing those issues which are in our mental health room. So I want to thank you so much, very much, Dr. Copeland, for what you brought to Portsmouth Coffee Talk on today. Bruce to me.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
Dr.
right.
Copeland. Well, thank you.
And thank you for what you do for the community. I think this program is excellent. You've been consistent with it. You've been around, and it gets better and better every year. And you touching on so many topics. It's like it's almost more topics than you can address in the time that you have. I think every community needs a program like this. I know as it relates to my own, whenever I've seen like Regina King's son commit suicide, that kind of
Yes.
got to me because it's like my worst nightmare come true. So
Hmm.
I took it upon myself. You know that saying that says, check on your well friends,
That's
the
right.
ones
That's
you
right.
believe in are well. So I went to
Mhm.
both my children and I said to them, um, no matter what the issue is, we can work it out. I say,
Mhm.
don't ever think that you can't come to me about, I don't care what it is, we can work it out. And just
Mhm.
ask them directly, are you suicidal? Have you
Mhm.
ever felt suicidal? If you feel that way, do you feel like you can come to me? And
Mhm.
that is a direct conversation I think everybody needs to have with their children.
Exactly.
Don't
Exactly.
wait until after. Ask them now today. Even if nothing appears to be wrong with them, your children appears to be like the student that Leah was talking about. Everything appeared to be
Mhm.
okay. You should ask your children, have you ever felt that way? Do you feel that way now? Would you come to me if you felt that way? And maybe do that every so often, just to
Mhm.
have that check-in with them.
Have
And
that wellness check,
that
mental
Yeah.
health wellness check.
that's a good way to put it, Leah. We're doing a wellness check on people we love, people who are around us,
Mhm.
you know. And the last thing I would tell you, our mental wealth fair that we're having at the Hampton Roads Convention Center, where we had 1,300 people. It is very nice what we do for our parents of those public school children. We have various and it's almost like a fair. It's not a professional workshop. There will be no PowerPoint presentations with people in suits and ties. We have various rooms that you can browse as though you were at a car show looking at
Mhm.
on sports cars. You can go into various rooms. We're doing something on the relationship between physical fitness and mental health. We have a licensed clinical social worker doing that. We have something a room that we call Mirror, which talks about self images. And you go into the
Mhm.
room, there are various mirrors in there, and that gives various views of a person. We're going to do that. We have a therapist coming from New York that we're flying in, and they're going to be there. It's an outstanding event. So I think we were um, ahead of our time in being able to do that. And but the thing I'm most excited about, like I told Leah, are the mental health screenings that we're going to do for the adults, and then to follow up after after we score those assessments and say, hey, look, it's a little high. And this
Mhm.
is what we would recommend. And just think about it. If we didn't do those people that we touch, they probably would never get anywhere near any
Exactly.
type of screening.
Exactly.
And these are different things we can do in the community for outreach. Just think if you went into one of your low income housing communities and you did mental health screenings
Mhm.
for the parents and for the children.
And for
And
the
then,
children.
and then you identify right there in that community. That's why you think about it. They talk about, we're going into the community and we're going to mentor these young boys, and we're going into the community and we're going to build a playground because they need somewhere to play.
Need more
Nobody's
than that.
nobody's checking on their mental health.
That's that.
Where
That's
are
right.
your mental health experts going into the community door to door and say, hey, just complete the scale? And if it looks like, it's almost like if you went to the you went door to door and you gave them COVID shots.
Mhm.
Nobody would be opposed to that. If
Mhm.
at the peak of COVID and we're trying to decrease the number of people dying from it, we did what we had to do. But if we treated mental health as a medical emergency, as a pandemic, the way we treated COVID, we would identify more people in need, and we would provide more treatment. But
Mhm.
right now, we don't treat mental health like a pandemic the way we did COVID. That's why so many people are suffering.
Yeah.
So
And I have to add this. I was at a meeting with the Portsmouth Health Department, and one of the questions I asked, because how often, just like you just said, Dr. Bruce, and how often do you all go out in communities? Because if you see a car with the health department or social services on it in the neighborhood now, you automatically think it's a problem. They are either coming to somebody that's not paying child support or something like that. But the need for them to get out in the community and let them know where help is and where people can go. That's what you need to do in order to attack these problems. All the meetings, you can have all the meetings and conferences that you want, but unless you're out there in the communities addressing some of these issues, we're going to always be dealing with these issues.
Yeah. Give them a gift card. If you
Yeah,
offer them
exactly.
a $10 gift card, even if it's $10,
Yeah.
complete this scale, this survey, give me your phone number, I'll call you when I get the results, and here's a $10 gift card. They'll complete it.
Yeah.
They'll
Those studies help.
yeah.
That's how you.
Yeah, so there should be screenings in the community, that type of thing. You just connect the screenings with all types of activities, even when parents are coming in to sign their kids up for school enrollment, or even at a night when they're having like a PTA meeting or a program for the kids. Do the screenings. Do them at a football game. Do them at the Norcom Grand Reunion. You do it.
Hey, you're right about that. You're right about that.
And you say, hey, just leave me your phone number, email, and I'll call you back with the results. And we can help link people to the community-based services that are available to them that way.
Wow. You know what?
Very
You're right about
important.
that, Bruce. Very important.
You gave Leah something else to think about.
Well, you just
Yeah.
take the stigma away, make it popular and fashionable to complete your scale. You know, I'll complete
Well,
this.
let me ask you something, Dr. Bruce Copeland. Say if the Alumni Association wanted to do a smaller scale of what you're doing, can we get you to advise us?
I sure can. And what I would like to do
Because
is
you are a graduate.
I am.
Yes.
Actually, I'm on the Portsmouth Schools Foundation now. So
Okay.
one of the things I would do, Leah, is to invite you and Slim out to our event just to observe.
I would
So
love
you
to
can
come.
see what we're doing is on October 30th. Yeah, we have a pretty good budget. It's the day before Halloween. It's on a Monday night, I believe, at the Hampton Roads Convention Center. And the way we got those parents out, we targeted their kids. We made we have a bunch of activities for kids, but we knew if we could get the kids excited about it, then the parents would come. We only targeted elementary school kids. That's all we needed to do. And they brought their parents out, and it was overwhelming because we did not prepare for that number of people. We were thinking 300, and we had 1,200 people. Our entire school board came out, the superintendent came out, and I don't think I've ever seen them happier. But we were asked to do that because our school board chair is a licensed professional counselor. So he's really big on mental health.
Okay, that sounds like something we'll definitely come there and observe and bring it back to our city as something that we can possibly do. If the city doesn't do it, it can be something that the alumni or any group can be involved with and do. We need to do something like that. And if you're asking your children how they're doing, and every answer is "I'm fine," it's usually not. If that's the only answer you get, "I'm fine," every day, in and out, it's usually not. So pay attention to that. Thanks, Dr. Bruce. I appreciate you coming in.
One other thing, and
Yeah,
parents,
go ahead, Leah.
stop the negative talk over your children, please. They internalize those things that you say when you're constantly coming to them with negative talk. Find something that's good about that child and compliment that child on the things that they do well. Don't keep addressing all the negative things that they do.
I have to add this too. You know how when we were coming up, your parents would tell you, if you're out in the store or something, "Don't you embarrass me out here." And they would tell you that, and then you would catch it later. You in the stores now, you see parents cussing little kids out.
That's true.
In public. And I'm thinking that would scar those kids. Remember that. And that's something that later on they might act out. It might be some of those same kids that we were talking about earlier that gun toting and don't care about their lives and don't mind taking a life because of some of the verbal abuse they took from their own family, from their own parents. And what's worse than taking that kind of abuse from your own parents in public? It's bad enough sometime in the house, but being in a grocery store, and I see it a lot.
Oh yes.
And I'm sure you have seen it too. It's not an isolated thing where parents just cuss the kid out in public. But anyway, I had to bring that up. Parents, be aware of that. So take care, everybody, and thanks for watching. And be sure to watch us Thursday at 7 p.m. when we actually have someone talking about going back to Africa. We've heard about people say, I'm going back to Africa. We actually going to have somebody that's actually going. Leah, is that person going, or their parents? I think you told me.
She's going to live. She's establishing her residency in Africa.
Okay. So we're going to have that person on to talk about
an expatriate.
Yes. And they'll talk about the reasons why. It might not be what you think. But anyway, tune in Thursday at 7 p.m. on Portsmouth Coffee Talks evening edition and hear that story. Thanks a lot for everybody, and take care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Doc.
All right. Have a good day.